Thank you for joining us for today's cybersecurity webinar presented by WireNet member Simplex IT. This is a 6-part series designed to demystify several IT issues that business leaders face. For those of you unfamiliar with WireNet, we're a 30-year-old nonprofit organization dedicated to strengthening Northeast Ohio through the support of manufacturing firms. Basically, we help manufacturers thrive to ensure their economic impact continues to support our region. We assist with challenges like navigating City Hall for permits, graffiti removal, advocating for infrastructure repairs, recruitment of new talent from accountants to machinists and plant managers, and even helping identify financing sources for equipment purchase or plant expansion. Companies of many types join WireNet to support our mission. One of those members is Simplex IT, who joined back in 2014. For those of you who don't know Bob, he's one of those geeks who speaks English. He understands business needs and can implement solutions that don't get in your way. With that, I will turn it over to Bob to discuss today's topic, protecting your company from data breaches. Bob?
Oh, me? Oh, yeah, right. Yeah. How you doing? Okay, so thank you, Ann, for that. So here's the fun challenge, is that we're going to talk about, just like everybody talks about, cybersecurity, which is the huge topic, and with all the breaches and the things along those lines. But we're going to try to do this from as much of a business standpoint as we are from a technical. So we're not going to get overly deep and dirty into the really geek level of things. We're instead going to talk about, from the business aspect, best practices and all that fun stuff. And the reason why is pretty straightforward, is that and as Ann mentioned, the whole concept of speaking English, and it's not so much English as a language, but it's getting away from the technobabble and really trying to get some of these concepts across to especially business management, because a lot of times geeks, we're really a lot more concerned about being correct and being right than we are in being understood. And we try to, here at Simplex IT, we try to bridge that gap. So, and by the way, I have to call your attention to, you'll notice, I think we are the first professional use of the WireNet 30th anniversary logo. We just got that. I'm just awed by being able to do that. So, cool. Moving on. About us, Simplex IT, we are a managed service provider, meaning that we both are the IT department and support IT departments for small and medium businesses. We've been around for about 10 years. This is our NASCAR slide. Aren't we wonderful? Yes, of course we are. We also have about 5 main services. We do the full IT support. We also have co-managed IT, where we actually support existing IT departments. We make them stronger. We make them better. We also do a lot of database stuff, and we do a lot of project management. And we're just introducing what we're calling Simplex TM, Train Me, where we're offering a variety of both online training courses as well as customized courses for things like Office, soft skills, security, all that kind of stuff for organizations. So we do that. As you can see, we do a lot of events. Here's our calendar of events coming up over the next month or so. We just did a webinar on Excel, Microsoft Excel, with filtering, grouping, sorting yesterday, and it's already up on YouTube. We're really excited about doing what we call the joint venture type of events, such as this, with protecting a company from data breaches. We've got the next one, 3 models of IT support, 3 models how you can guide IT support for your organization. I'm not going to go through all the other things, but as you can see, we're pretty busy. And also my book. My book is actually coming out. It's been almost a year in the making. It's coming out on January 26th. Why I'm not showing the cover? We don't have the cover done yet, but it's been an interesting thing. And it's specifically CEO's Guide, Survival Guide to Information Technology. The whole idea is that we can help organizations better manage their information technology. We may be, our next month's topic through WireNet is going to be IT policy and procedures, and if there's going to be enough interest, we may be repeating what we did last year, and Ann, I think, took part in this, where we did a 4-hour workshop where we actually walk people through developing their own policy and procedures for their organizations. So we've got that coming out in March. So here's one of the key things. If there's any, especially if you're business management, if there's one takeaway to come away with in terms of cybersecurity, is that it makes the bad guys money. And this is based on the FBI's report for 2016. And you'll notice the total number of complaints and the total dollar loss. And this is only what's reported to the FBI within the United States. And you'll notice the growth in terms of dollars and losses, that the number of complaints is relatively stable, but the losses, the dollar amount, is skyrocketing because the guys have found out. If we looked at 4 to 5 years ago, the whole idea of malware was simply to be interruptive, to cause changes or to introduce havoc or damage to information technology for their organizations. Okay. And since then, starting really with ransomware, the bad guys found a model that could make them money. So now we're dealing with entrepreneurs. Now we're dealing with people who are actually incentivized. And this is just one of the ways. It's automated too. So the whole idea of we're too small is no longer relevant because the bad guys have found numerous ways to penetrate, and we'll talk about this, to penetrate your organization or anybody's organization and to create a situation where they can make some amount of money. And in some cases, some amount of money is a couple $100. They're going to encrypt your data and they'll hold it ransom for $200, $300. It's a reasonable fee, and it's a great product. Once it's encrypted, you can't decrypt it without the key. The FBI has basically said there's no decrypting except for paying the ransom. And guess what? Sometimes they don't actually pay up, or they don't actually give you the decrypting key. So, but here's one of the things I want to show you. This is according to Sophos, which is one of our partners, security partners. They do an annual malware forecast that shows what happened. And last year, a majority of the malware attacks that was seen was the WannaCry. The WannaCry virus, that was big around April or so, and it was specifically aimed at Microsoft Windows servers. But here's the thing. It actually took, if you had your servers patched and updated with the latest updates, you would have been safe. So it wasn't a case of somebody coming in and taking and having to be take advantage of anything other than the flaw in the operating system. And if the operating system was updated properly, you never blinked an eye because everything was fine. And that's one of the reasons why I talk to people, because a lot of companies think, I got antivirus, I'm protected. According to most reports, viruses account for less than 30% of actual attempted attacks on companies. That's actually about 2 years old. So my suspicion is it's probably closer to 20% or 15%. A virus is only one type of exploit that's attempted to go after companies. And so one of the things that you have to walk away with from a management standpoint is that it is a layered approach in terms of protection. Just like if all you did for your house, and your house has a front door, a back door, it has a garage door, it has windows on the first floor, if you have a second floor, windows on the second floor. Every one of those entryways needs to have some layer, some level of security or protection. And you may think then that the second floor windows don't need any. Well, there was this invention recently called a ladder. And not to be totally flip, except for I did mean to be totally flip, but the same sort of thing happens there to your business as happens here, is that every potential entryway into your organization is a potential exploit that the bad guys can take advantage of. So why are they doing this? And this gets back to that whole incentivization, that these guys are incentivized to do this. So they're going to get money through ransom. And the ransomware is pretty simple. Some agent is then run on your network that has access to your data. It will then encrypt your data using a key that you don't have, they do, and they will not unencrypt the data until you pay money. Okay. Dollars through trickery. Dollars through trickery, there's one of the one of the examples of that is called a man in the middle. That is where they either impersonate someone or they intercept emails, and through that they gather financial information or send you bogus invoices, and you pay them, and you end up paying third parties. We've run into several instances of some pretty sophisticated attacks on that we've been able to, in most cases, thwart. In one case, we had a company, and they were new to us. They called us after the fact, and we were able to verify that what happened is exactly what happened, and they ended up losing about 80 grand because they approved a wire transfer to the wrong bank. And it was interesting was that in this particular case, their bank actually called them and said, "This looks suspicious. Do you still want to do it?" And they said, "Oh yeah, it's no problem," because they were so convinced that the conversation they had with the bad actors was legitimate. We then have money through blackmail. There was, of course, the Ashley Madison case about 3 years ago, which is a site that encourages or helps facilitate extramarital affairs, where hackers got access to their database and they held ransom. They said, "We're going to release the database with all the members unless you pay a ransom," and they didn't. So the bad guys publicized all of the membership of Ashley Madison, and some awkward marital counseling sessions ensued afterwards. And then, as you can see, we also want credentials, we want identity theft, critical business information, online reputation, access to resources, just inflict damage. Stuxnet is the famous case for that. In the Stuxnet case, there was actually a virus that, whether you believe whether it was the Israelis or the CIA or some combination, it infected a number of the centrifuges for Iran's nuclear program, that the controls that were controlling the speed, the rotation of the centrifuges, which are incredibly complex and very expensive, so it looked like they were spinning at very low speeds, but in fact they were spinning at very, very high speeds, caused these devices to all break. That caused huge damage to Iran's nuclear program, and because of numerous methods, whether it be called Freedom of Information Act, the people who are just spewing out the information, a lot of the tools to do these things has been made public. So the bad guys know how to do this, and know how to do this better every year. And here's the challenge. From your organizational standpoint, you're trying to protect your organization, and at the same time, you're also increasing the complexity of the organization, both internally and externally. So this is from a report called State of Security from CompTIA, which is a non-vendor aligned IT organization, kind of similar to what WireNet does locally, but CompTIA is specifically for IT and nationally. So instead of just being, we got servers and we got workstations, now we've got voice and video systems, we've got the IPRX, which is for data traffic that's other than that stuff. We got voicemails, we got perimeter devices, VPNs, firewalls, routers. We've got all of these devices, and every one of them gives us the ability to communicate between devices. And in order to do that, every one of them has to have some kind of control and configuration and possible exploit. Every one of these layers of technology. So let's take that a little more specific, and this is kind of the meat of the matter. When we talk about breaches, if we look at, and this is actually an illustration from my book, is we have a relatively traditional organization, and we'll get into cloud service in a moment, how cloud service changes things a bit. But we have a traditional internet connection, ISP connection, and then we have a firewall, or what we call them these days, unified threat management devices, which is supposed to control and keep bad guys out, but allow good guys to connect to our network. We then have a switch, which is the traffic cop for all of the data traffic throughout all of the devices. It's the thing with all the network cables plugged into. We have servers. We've got a bunch of workstations. And then we've got wireless access points with tablets, wireless devices, or even laptops and workstations all connecting. And then we have all of these outside external players who are all connecting. Every one of these, without getting into what the role of these devices are, every one of these represents a potential exploit to your company. So if we go through, and yes, I animated a PowerPoint slide, and I'm updating my resume accordingly. So first of all, the firewall in UTM has to be managed and up to date. A firewall from 3 years ago is not is not good enough. And the reason being is because a firewall just a few years ago was really a device that was supposed to be on a security level was limited. It was limited in terms of it just wanted to make sure the right type of traffic came by. Yeah, we're keeping out file transfer protocols. We're allowing web browsing to go out, meaning your employees can go see websites. We're not allowing websites or web traffic to come in. We're putting limits. We're routing things. Nowadays, UTMs are significantly more complex, not terribly more expensive, but they're significantly more complex in terms of the level and layers of security that they're offering. So you need to have a UTM, and we're calling them UTMs because they're really not just firewalls anymore. They're truly unified threat management devices if they're properly done. And then it has to be managed. It has to have a good idea of who can do what is allowed through, what kind of testing is it doing, is it preventing known malware from entering into your network, is it preventing people from going to known malware sites, is it doing all of those things. The next is the switch. Not many people realize this, but when Target years ago was hacked, what actually happened was they weren't initially hacked. It was their air conditioning vendor, their HVAC vendor. They were hacked, and they had access to Target's corporate headquarters network in order to monitor and manage corporate headquarters air conditioning. And they were able to, the bad guys were able to get in through the HVAC vendor to Target's corporate network, and then within that network, they were able to access Target servers. Boom, done. With a switch, what could have and should have happened is it should have been segmented. So the air conditioning IT traffic never saw Target servers and vice versa. So that security systems, your visitors on the wireless network, all of those kind of things, so that people can't even see the devices. That's the goal for that. Wireless. Wireless needs to be secure. Fortunately or unfortunately, we're left in a world where on the one side, we want things to be secure. On the other side, we want things to be easy and productive. And sometimes the two are not equal. The best example that I give to people in this situation is let's say you live in an apartment building. In an apartment building, when you move in, they give you two keys. They give you a key for your apartment. You are the only one who has that. And they give you a key to the front door of the whole building, everybody in the building. Why? It's 2 layers of security. The first layer is to ensure that the only people who get into the building are the people who are appropriate. Okay? The second is the only people who get into your facility, to your home, is you. So the example I give is if you're walking up to the front door of the building, you've got your key out, you're about to go inside, and right behind you is somebody you've never seen before, excuse me, who is carrying a whole bunch of groceries, who has a couple kids, who whatever, and they look fine. They don't have their key out. 99% of you will let that person in. Will open the door, hold the door open, say here, and they will go thank you. And why? Because we're nice people. From a security standpoint, you have just totally defeated that first layer of security for that building. What should have happened from a business standpoint is you should have halted, closed the door, and made sure that person had the key to go in. But instead, to be nice and to maintain that second person's productivity so that they weren't caught up in having to find their key, we let that second person in. In a lot of cases, wireless connectivity or access from vendors or customers or whatever often errs on the side of we want to be good, we want to be cool. Now, what's the alternative? Well, the alternative is to put something more sophisticated. Okay, well, more sophisticated, like facial recognition. So the person who's got the groceries can just stand in front of a monitor. The monitor will recognize them automatically and let them in which case we don't take that hit in productivity, and you don't have to make that decision whether or not you should hold the door open or not. So productivity is maintained, but costs just went up. So and this is where management, business management and ownership need to provide guidance. In terms of from the geek standpoint, we can explain where the risks are and what the solutions are in terms of costs and benefits, but only business management can say it's worth it. We want to have risk control. We want to have risk management. And I think that dialogue is missing. And actually, that's a core concept behind my book, is in a lot of cases, the IT guy or gal is making the decision on what should we do in those cases. And the reverse is where we have the management is deciding, I want this technology, whether or not it makes sense from the business standpoint. So from a wireless access, we need to make sure it's secure. We need to make sure that the appropriate wireless connection is secure in order to connect to any corporate resources like servers, printers, workstations, whatever, and that if there is a wireless network that is there for guests, that it is reasonably secure in terms of they can get out to the internet, but that's all they can do, and they can't hog up all the bandwidth and the like. Servers need to be patched. Again, we talked about the WannaCry. We talked about the WannaCry from the standpoint of saying that was not a case of the malware was causing it. That was a case of a vulnerability on the part of the operating system. Now, you may have heard more recently that of Meltdown and Spectre. Now, Meltdown and Spectre are not the operating system. They're not software faults. They're actually hardware faults. So now we've got the chips, the actual processors that everything runs on. They have been discovered to have a vulnerability. And just about everybody is affected by this one. All Apple devices, pretty much all servers, workstations, the whole nine yards. And the bottom line is, and this is literally being written as we speak, there is a strategy that processors were using to try to increase efficiency and speed by predicting and allocating memory based on what they think is going to happen. And that stuff that was changed, the memory that was changed by that, was left vulnerable for exploits. Well, the problem is it's hardware, so you can't fix it without replacing the chipsets, and that's not going to happen. So what's happening instead is that the operating systems, Windows Server, Apple's OS, OS X, all those kind of guys are coming out with patches that disable that. I just saw an alert today saying that with a lot of AMD boxes, the Windows patch that came out are actually mucking up the boot sequence. So beware. But ultimately, once the patch is in place, we want to make that patch available. We want to make sure that happens. Okay. All right. Similarly, workstations need to be patched. And when I say workstations need to be patched, we're talking at this point, on this level, we're talking about, again, the Windows updates, the Mac OS updates, whatever the updates, the Android updates, all of those kind of things, because a majority of those have to do with security. And if you talk to somebody who's been in IT for a long time, like me, we often would say, I'm not going to patch because patching breaks things, like what I just mentioned about the AMD. Well, the problem with that is that right now the patching often fixes or protects things. So I absolutely agree with the concept in 90% of the time that you don't want to be the first person to apply a patch. You just don't. You know, the squeaky wheel may get the grease, but the tallest nail gets the hammer. What you do want to do, though, is you do want to make sure that you may not be second in line, but you're not much further back than third. So for both so what we do is we do workstation patching we separate into two groups. We have groups that are with each of our clients that have said, yeah, we want these machines are the guinea pigs. So we will patch those guys within a week or two of the patch being released, and then a week or two after that, we'll patch everybody else. So we're never more than 3 or 4 weeks out of patching as far as our workstations go. And our servers, we take a little bit more time as far as implementing the server patches, but not much more than a month. And of course, if there's an emergency where we see, wow, this is a really huge security risk, we'll patch those more quickly. But the old school idea of we don't need to patch except once a year or whatever, those days are gone. And similarly, not only the workstations from the operating system standpoint, but the applications. And by applications, I'm talking about the things that we use to connect with the rest of the network and the rest of the internet. Browsers, add-ons like Java, Flash, all of that kind of fun stuff. Because a lot of the exploits, a lot of the tools, especially when we look on websites that are contaminated with malware, they will take advantage. When you think about it, that makes sense. Let's take Java, for example. We want a website to be as interactive as possible with the end user, with the person who's actually visiting the website. Well, the website is far away across a slow internet connection. So what we want to do instead is the website will have a small little mini application written in something like Java or Flash. And there's other tools as well, but these are the two biggies, especially in terms of vulnerability. So this application will actually run on your desktop, so it's easy to create really bad malware exploits using Java or Flash. So we want to make sure that those are updated. There's actually services, Night is one of them, which does a great job of making sure your workstations are up to date with all things. And then finally, remote connectivity should be restricted. So if you have people who are on the outside looking in, you want to make sure, whether it be remote workers or customers or vendors, stakeholders, whoever, you want to make sure that they're secure and they're connecting appropriately as well. And that gets back into where the difference between a firewall and a UTM. The UTMs, Unified Threat Management Devices, usually are pretty good at allowing you to have good control over that. And that could be in its own session right there. The other thing that I want to make really sure, and I know we're running short on time here, is that you also understand the fact that phishing, which is essentially a kind of a social media way, or it is a way to encourage or trick an end user into giving out information, sharing information or access to something. These guys are getting ridiculously sophisticated. And they're becoming sophisticated in ways that are both invasive and are both very, very difficult to detect. We're seeing more and more instances where what ends up happening is the Microsoft Outlook account in 365 gets hacked because the person gave the credentials, and rules are created on either Outlook or up in the cloud that will be sending and receiving emails and automatically forwarding them to the bad guys and then deleting them so that the person doesn't even see them in their signed items folder necessarily. So this is one where, to a certain degree, you have to train your employees. You have to communicate with your employees as to what they should be doing, what they shouldn't be doing. You're seeing more and more organizations such as ours that are offering online training for end-user security, and also offering basically trial phishing attacks, where we will create the material and the content and send it to the employers or employees with the idea that we'll then follow up and say, yeah, you shouldn't have clicked here, you should have clicked here, so on and so forth. We've got only time to go through these really, really quickly. When we're talking about overall cybersecurity, we've got products, people, process, and policies. And products, and by the way, this will be up on YouTube ultimately, so you can actually go through these details. Products are, the antivirus products, the UTMs, all of that. And the key thing on those is you have to have them, and they have to be updated, and they have to be managed and monitored. People, boy, is that the big one. If there's any of these pillars that is ignored the most, it's people. We need to train them better. And then the process. How do you deal with risk assessment? Who makes the decisions over what is appropriate in terms of new technology or maintaining old technology? And then the policy. Who's deciding what is the policy? How's the policy communicated? If people aren't told what they can do, are people allowed to work from home on their computers on work stuff? And this is, again, on YouTube, you'll be able to go through this details. These are the minimal cybersecurity strategies, what we talk about. And to sum up, the bad guys, if all they have to do is find one vulnerability. And it's cheap. It is incredibly cheap for them to try. So they can try all sorts of different methods until they find one that works. Once they find it, they exploit it, they're in. And the final point I'll make is backups. Your last solution, especially in terms of ransomware or where someone's being destroying things, being destructive, you need to make sure your backups are tested. We've seen numerous occasions where somebody thought they had backups when they initially contacted us, and we took a look at them, and it turns out they didn't, or they weren't as up-to-date or useful as they thought they were. You need to make sure your backups work. In any case, the last thing is that if anybody is interested in talking about this more, this is as hard of a sales pitch as we'll make in these webinars, but we'd be happy to talk to you, or whoever's handling your current IT. And if they seem to not be entirely up to date on the security, give them our contact information. We'd be happy to talk to them. We share our information with anybody who's interested. So just contact me at bob@simplex-it.com if you're interested. And that, I think, is pretty much it. So I'd like to thank you for your attention. And if you have any questions, feel free to put it in, the chat. For those of you who are on by phone, you just see the audio. You missed some really cool PowerPoint animations. You have to wait for YouTube. But thank you otherwise. Ann?
Thanks, Bob. That was great. We hope that you will join us next month on February 21st at 11 a.m. Our topic will be policies and procedures, everything from departing employees to equipment disposal use. I guess equipment use and disposal. There we go. Look for information online. Thanks so much, and we'll see you next month.
Bye.
Bye.